One way I find useful to looking at mental illness, and particularly recovery from mental illness, is to approach mental illness like it's drowning. So then recovery is like learning how to swim. And by using this analogy, in no way am I intending to suggest that mental illnesses aren't physical, because drowning is also an extremely physical experience. So say, for instance, you're somebody who doesn't swim and you've been taken to deep water for some reason, you've fallen over the side of the boat or something like that. You've never swam before and you're struggling to stay afloat. So your arms are flailing, your legs are kicking, the waves are coming at you, trying to push you under. Very quickly, your muscles are getting tired. It's painful to keep trying to do that because you don't have experience swimming. You haven't built up the strength or the endurance. You don't even know exactly what you're supposed to do. Your heart would be racing, your lungs would be heaving. So all sorts of things would start to change in your body. Cortisol would be flooding, you'd be having this very stressful experience. So cortisol is flooding through your body, adrenaline is pumping, fear or flight responses are firing off, but of course you can't flee, you can't fight, you're stuck there, so you're struggling even harder, getting worn out even faster. And there's no possible way you can think yourself into swimming because you've never had that experience. You have no memory of swimming. Let's say not even anybody around you is a swimmer, so you don't know people who swim. You have no context from which to draw. Nobody from the shore or from the boat that you just got knocked off can shout at you and make you swim. Right? They can't just say, hey, why don't you buck up and be a swimmer? Just like when someone's struggling with a mental illness, you can't say to them, hey, just get over it. Be better. Right? You can't say that to a drowner. You can't say, hey, you're drowning right now. Well, be more of a swimmer. That person doesn't know how to swim, and on top of that, they haven't had any experience or practice swimming, so they cannot do it because that is a process. On top of it, they probably want to shout at themselves, be a swimmer, don't drown, and they're probably constantly being very critical of themselves for drowning, but no amount of shouting inside their head, no amount of judging themselves negatively and yelling at themselves and being down on themselves, or even being super positive about themselves is going to help them not drown because they don't know how. The people on the shore, they can be really positive, like, you can do it if you try hard, just think happy thoughts and swimming will be attracted to you. You can't think yourself into swimming any more than you can think yourself into being healthy. Both take action and practice and a lot of hard work. If we looked internally at what was going on with that person who's drowning, we would see their cortisol is just flooding through their body, adrenaline is pumping, maybe all sorts of things are going on with hormones, all sorts of systems inside of there, neurotransmitters, whatever. If we were able to measure that inside of a drowning person, we would probably say, comparing them to somebody who's not drowning, that the drowner is chemically imbalanced. Look, all sorts of things inside of them are out of whack. We need to adjust those and balance them out. Relieving those symptoms doesn't address the fact that they are drowning and they don't know how to swim. And if we look inside the brains at what's going on amongst the drowners and we compare that to people who aren't drowning or people who are swimming pleasantly because that's something they know how to do, we'd probably see two very different brain scans. If the neurological structures and activity in the drowners were different than the people who can swim or the people who are on shore and not even in the water, that wouldn't necessarily mean that A, those people who are drowning are stuck with that they can't learn how to swim. That's just the way their brains are. They're deficient. Their brains are full of drowning. B, it doesn't necessarily mean that the neurological structures or the neurological activity is responsible for the person drowning. It could be that the differences in activity are the consequences of one person who's never learned how to swim and the other person who's been practicing swimming all of the time. Right? Just how if we look at the bodies of a person who exercises and a person who doesn't exercise, they will look quite different. They will function quite differently. That doesn't mean the person who doesn't exercise can't learn how to exercise. That also doesn't mean the person who does exercise is that way because their body just magically was born really fit. When we're measuring what's happening biologically in a person who's struggling either physically or mentally, what we see is not necessarily a cause. It could be just as likely that it's a consequence. And that's another reason why I like looking at the analogy of swimming, because swimming is something that not everybody has access to. And that's not because of a biological reason or a genetic reason, but because of the socio-economic context with which they find themselves, because learning how to swim requires certain access and certain privileges that aren't available to everybody. When it comes to approaching mental illness in our society, we often approach it like it's a medical problem. But I'm just going to throw out the question there. I mean, if somebody doesn't know how to swim, do they have an illness? When somebody is struggling with their mental health, is that a medical issue? Or is that an education, accessibility, and poverty issue? Considering those questions has really helped me with approaching my own recovery. I don't see it as an illness or a medical issue, I see it as a skills issue. It's about learning. Before we go any further with that, we've got to get our drowning person into recovery. So we got somebody who's drowning in the ocean right now, they're just flailing around. We need to get that person out of the water and we need to get them on land, because we've already established no amount of yelling at them is magically going to make them think their way into being able to swim. Haven't learned how to swim. Right now, they need help. We're gonna rescue that person, we're gonna get them on land. Now, we get them on land, they're not drowning anymore, they're probably gonna be really stressed out, right? Their body, they're gonna be in shock. We can just give them some medication, we can cover up the symptoms of that experience. Like I said, we could cover up the symptoms of them drowning, we could make that totally pleasant. You know, I'm sure somebody can do a study to show that giving sedatives to people who are drowning makes them far more compliant and calm. We can get rid of the symptoms, we can get rid of the things that bother you while you're drowning. But ideally, we help that person who's drowning the next day get into swimming classes. Because at the end of the day, there is a cause for that problem we just saw. That was a very biological experience. They physically are incapable of swimming, but they can change that. We can cover up the symptoms all we want and relieve those symptoms all we want, and some people may enjoy that, and that is fine. But if that person doesn't want to drown anymore, if they don't want to experience that distress again, we can get that person into swimming lesson through practice and making available to them the tools and the education so that they can learn how to handle that situation in the future. They can change their body, they can change their brains, and they will be able to swim. Not only will they be able to not drown, but they may actually start to like being in the water. And that's what recovery is all about. It's not about avoiding water for the rest of your life. It's about being able to go back into the situations that used to cause you distress and actually being able to handle them, being able to swim in them. Learning how to swim is difficult and it's incredibly tough, and it's something we have to practice all the time. So talk to other people who are already swimming all the time and can support you in that experience. And yes, many people do not have the socioeconomic means or the privileges or the access to get swimming lessons, whether that's real swimming lessons or swimming lessons for the brain. So let's change that. The last reason I really like this analogy when it comes to mental health is because it can fundamentally shift the way we talk about mental health and mental illness, and particularly how we as people who are building the skills to have great mental health talk about our own experience. If you've ever met somebody who's learning how to swim, have they said to you, you know what, I'm a drowner. I go to this pool and get these lessons because I drown. I'm a drowner, so I'm learning how to not drown. That's not how they approach it. They learn how to swim. And the moment they start learning how to swim, they're a swimmer. But that's not how we approach mental health. Within the psychiatric system, within the medical system, even within advocacy organizations, if somebody's had one experience of drowning, we stick this label on them. Like, they are a drowner, and that's how we represent them for the course of their journey. This person, they really struggle with drowning, so we've got to help them not drown. Can you imagine how popular learning how to swim would be if everybody who wanted to learn how to swim was labeled as a drowner? No wonder people see stigma around mental illness. Who wants to be a drowner? If you're taking steps to build great mental health, no matter how early you are on that journey, you are doing something healthy. Physical fitness has gotten it right, where they focus on the possibility. We view exercise as healthy. For some reason, when it comes to mental illness, no matter how far along the person is on their journey, no matter how many amazing skills they've developed so that they're not going to drown again, we still have that person walk around with the idea that they're a drowner, and often it's that person themselves who keeps representing themselves as, I'm a drowner. There was that time like 3 years ago where I had that drowning episode. Gotta watch out for my drowning. I'd say this is a challenge within the medical system, but it's also a challenge for people with lived experience of mental health challenges, and just in general, how society looks at mental health. We focus on the problem rather than the possibility. We focus on what's wrong, not what's strong, and what's getting stronger. Being a great swimmer does not happen overnight. Being great at recovery does not happen overnight. It takes time to build physical health and fitness. It takes time to build mental health and fitness. But the moment you start on that journey, the moment you're taking healthy steps to learn how to swim and you're changing things in your life to support that, you are not a drowner anymore, you are a swimmer. So I don't struggle with OCD, I don't struggle with generalized anxiety disorder, I don't struggle with depression, I don't struggle with addiction. I'm not spending my time and my energy not being those things. Just like a swimmer is not spending their time and their energy not drowning. They are swimming. It is a positive thing. I put my time and my energy into building great mental health, building great mental fitness. I think it's time we start to approach mental illness like drowning and mental health like learning how to swim. So let's look at how we can help people access the skills and the opportunities to learn how to swim. And let's recognize that that experience, the moment people start on that experience, they are building health and fitness. They are not struggling with an illness. They are doing something positive, they're doing something healthy, and they're doing something that we can all be excited by. Not something we have to hide. It's not something we have to be ashamed of, because we're not focused on drowning, we're focused on swimming. So let's all throw on skimpy bathing suits, get in the ocean, and get practicing.